think we will soon be getting started. I see the moderator and panelists of our next session. If I might please have your attention, ladies and gentlemen, let's take our seats now. And in the next 30 minutes, we're going to be delving into the role of, well, within this 30 minutes, we'll be looking at the role of carbon markets and how we can accelerate net zero transition, how they can be there as a guide to sort of inform global efforts towards achieving these targets that we've set out. So we'll be looking at the challenges as well as the opportunities of emission pricing through domestic sort of market-based instruments. We're also going to be discussing the critical role of international cooperative approaches in increasing both the ambition and the efficiency on the path to, of course, a sustainable future. This session is going to be moderated by Hania Dawood, who is the Practice Manager for Climate Finance and Economics at the World Bank, and she will introduce her panelists. So over to you, Hania.
Okay, thank you.
Where would you like to sit?
Yeah.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hania Dawood. I'm the Practice Manager for the Climate Finance and Economics Group at the World Bank, the team that's actually hosting I4C with the support of the government of Germany and the government of Spain and AITA and ICAP. I'm delighted to be moderating this panel today. We have different perspectives from the private sector, developed economy, and G20 fast-growing economy. And very, very pleased to introduce our panel today. We have with us His Excellency Bertold Goke, the DG of Climate Action from BMW, the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Action, who, as I mentioned, are generous supporters for I4C, but also the World Bank's broader work on carbon markets and carbon pricing. We also have with us His Excellency Arif Havas Ogroseno, the ambassador from Indonesia. Indonesia, one of the fastest growing G20 economies, and has ambitious climate goals, and is also considering various instruments from emission trading systems and carbon crediting, and is actually one of the countries in our PMI program, which we're very proud to work with. And we also have Mr. Peter Rietz, the CEO of the European Energy Exchange, which is a platform where energy projects are traded, including European allowances. I'd like to first start with you, Mr. Goke. You mentioned yesterday in your opening remarks that you were part of or you attended the Carbon Expo about a decade ago. Very curious about your perspective. I mean, how does the world look differently today on the topics of carbon pricing and carbon markets compared to a decade ago?
Well, yes, I think it's a very interesting question because, as you mentioned, I have not participated in this conference for 10 years, but I have participated 2 times in the predecessor event, the Carbon Expo. And what I've seen yesterday when I came here and discussed with different stakeholders here, that much more people in the economy have discovered the carbon markets, people and groups who perhaps were a bit reluctant, 10 or 12 years ago, which kind of chances can be found in this carbon market system, and therefore, above that also the attitude towards carbon pricing has developed I think in a positive manner, and therefore, well, yes, we can observe here in Berlin in this week that much more stakeholders than more than 10 years ago are now interested to engage themselves in carbon markets.
Great, thank you. And yesterday in your speech, you also mentioned that we need instruments that can aggressively reduce greenhouse gases, and carbon pricing and carbon markets can do this. Of course, Germany is a pioneer in emission trading systems, at the national level and international level as well. Tell us about Germany's approach to deploy carbon pricing instruments.
Well, as you mentioned, we started early within the European Union, establishing, the emission trading system as a carbon pricing instrument in order to achieve our reduction goals with regard to greenhouse gases. But firstly, I would like to state that that for us, carbon pricing and emission trading systems are, a part of a broad policy mix, a broad policy mix which encompasses both regulatory instruments on the one hand, such as the phase out of coal, as well as targeted funding programs. They also belong to our policy mix when combating climate change, but, and that is definitely correct and for us a very key instrument, that is the national and European emission trading system that we have established because we have seen early the possibility that low emission products and manufacturing processes become more financially attractive, and if you have a pricing system, and this creates technological neutral incentives for companies and households to make investments in technologies that which help us to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. And we can see we have quite impressive results with regard to these instruments. The European emission trading scheme, the ETS1, has in the fields where these emissions are covered, we can see a reduction at almost half of the emissions since the introduction of the emission trading scheme nearly 20 years ago. And in Germany, we have also established, in addition to this European scheme for the aspects of transport and housing and building, a further emission trading scheme in 2021. And this scheme is to transition to the new ETS2, which has been decided upon in the last period of the European Parliament by the European Union, and which takes effect from 2027. And when we then have these two emission trading systems, we will see that 85% of total CO2 emissions will fall under carbon pricing. I think that is really a successful story, which we have to tell in this conference in order to show that we are on the right track with regard to carbon pricing in Europe, and that we have to can offer opportunities to draw lessons from the experiences that we have made in Europe, and that we also have, and we can talk about this later on, the opportunity to share with others our experiences and to show others in which way, or help others in which way they can establish carbon pricing systems like an ETS or other comparable carbon pricing systems.
Yeah, and indeed, I mean, hugely successful story, above 80% coverage as compared to what we reported in last year's States and Trends report is 23% global coverage. And actually the headline from the report earlier this year is that we hit a record with carbon pricing revenues. Much of it is driven from the German ETS approach. So definitely a lot of lessons learned there. My next question is to you, Mr. Rietz. So German businesses have compliance requirements under a range of policies, national and EU. Give us the companies and businesses' perspectives on the challenges and opportunities to comply with policy requirements, especially given that these requirements are changing quickly, and different sectors have different targets and different ambitions and different decarbonization strategies.
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to do that. Many of you know European Energy Exchange, EEX, probably more from the power sector, as we are the biggest power exchange in the world, and #1 in Europe, and also in the US and in Japan, for example. And because of that, we have all the sectors, especially in the power industry, as our exchange members. And we have direct contact with a lot of the industry through that. But EX is also has a lot of experience in the emissions market. We started this market in 2005, and we started running the auctions on behalf of all the European governments in 2011. And your question on how has that evolved over time is a very relevant one, not only for the companies itself, but for the market as a whole. If you look at how much bigger this market has become over time. I mean, you mentioned it in the World Bank report, we can see it. There are 75 mechanisms now that cover, discover a price. About half of them are trading system, cap and trade trading systems. The other half are more tax-based. And we as EX engage in different parts of the world to help establish and run these markets. As I said, we are the auctioning platform for all of the European governments. We're also running carbon markets in the US and Canada. We're running the carbon market for the New Zealand government. So those are already all working, and we are helping other regions on the way towards establishing an ETS. So for example, in China, in Turkey, in Kazakhstan, we're all sharing the experience that we have made here in Europe, as I said, for more than almost 20 years now. The belief that an ETS is the most efficient way to reduce carbon emissions is spreading. We can see that in the number of ETSs established, but we can also see it because it by definition reaches the target, because we're setting the limit, and it reaches the target in the most cost-efficient way. And that obviously means that the companies that are covered in their sector by these ETSs have to take this more seriously than in the past. Also, if you look at the price level, I mean, here in Europe, the price around 70 euros per ton of emissions, this becomes a major cost factor depending on the industry you're in. So people are taking this more seriously in their long-term decisions where they're making their investments. And you can see that across sectors, whether it's people that are reducing their coal emissions in the power sector far beyond what is legally required, because it's just an economic decision to do so with the carbon price of 70 euros, or whether it's investing in clean hydrogen in the steel sector, for example. It varies a lot across industries, but there's one common denominator to all of this, and that is the managing the price risks on long-term markets. And that's where EX can provide these long-term markets. The second element is it's also becoming much broader in its sector coverage. So it's no longer just the power companies that are involved. Even financial companies are involved as service providers. So the whole industry is broadening as the sector coverage of the emissions is broadening. We just heard that we have a national system and it will evolve into a European system for additional sectors in the ETS2 with the heating and transportation sector, but also the ETS1 is evolving slowly but surely, adding additional industries. For example, the whole shipping industry is now covered by ETS1 as well as of this year. So it is another step towards increasing the coverage even more, both regionally and sector-wise. Because at the end of the day, the planet doesn't care where the ton of emissions is coming from or which sector it's coming from. We're addressing a global problem, so we have to work towards a vision that we increase the coverage both regionally as well as sector coverage. The ultimate goal in all of this, and I heard it in the previous panel, and I talked a bit about voluntary carbon markets, and the overlap or with the mandatory ones, is ultimately we need to work towards a global price of carbon, covering all sectors. But that's a long shot, still a lot of steps to go, but every step counts, and you can see a lot of coverage in these regards and a lot of small steps that ultimately will lead us towards that goal.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And having a clear price signal is ultimately what's going to incentivize companies to do the right thing. Ambassador Havas, for us at the World Bank, over the past 5 years or so, we really placed integrating climate and economic development at the center of everything that we do. And for our client countries in emerging markets, in a world that's where governments are fiscally constrained and where governments have limited resources to act, you know, there's often a tension, or at least a perceived tension. I'm curious about, you know, in the case of Indonesia, how do you see this tension? Is there one? And what role do carbon pricing policies and carbon markets play in your approach to economic development and climate action?
You mentioned about financial restraint or fiscal restraint. Let me start by giving you our calculations on how much finance do we need in Indonesia for the mitigation and adaptations of climate change. And our Minister of Finance, Dr. Sri Mulyani, who was before the Managing Director of the World Bank, the calculation was, or it still is, that we need 281 billion US dollar until 2030 to be able to mitigate the climate change in Indonesia, the impact. And the national budget can only cover 18%. And as you are well aware, the World Bank has put Indonesia into the conditions or situations or location, whatever you name it, as the upper middle income country. So we don't get any more grant. Maybe some grant for studies, but not, you know, major grant. So the source of the finance is something that is very much in the thinking of the government, and there are a couple of mechanisms where we establish on how to, you know, close the gap of the requirements. The first one is what we call the climate budget tagging. So the government would put allocation of funds to the ministries, and specifically for climate change and climate mitigations, and the KPI will be derived from that, and then the performance of every year will be judged on that particular climate budget tagging. Number two is the public finance instruments. The green bond, the blue, the green sukuk, the blue bond, the samurai bond that we launched in Japan, that type of financing. And then we have the multilateral finance, of course, from the World Bank. We have blended finances, of course, as well. And we have ETM, energy transition mechanisms. And in the ETM, we have including the JETP with Germany, US, and Japan, 20 billion US dollar, and of course, carbon market. So carbon market is part of the whole sets of policy where Indonesia needs to establish itself, to finance itself in these climate change mitigation and adaptations. Now, specifically on carbon market, we have established the fundamental governance of it. We have the government regulation, we have the ministerial regulations. We have also governance on the carbon capture and storage as well. We have also organized ourselves in terms of the national financials instrument for that. But I think we are still not yet to the practical sector, and that's why in terms of, for instance, how we calculate the whole emission, how we would assign the emissions, how we divide mandatory and voluntary market, as you mentioned, how we see the challenge of voluntary. There are some fears in Indonesia, for instance, that if we open up everything voluntary, then we will not be able to control it. It's a question of establishing further the governance of that. I think we will have a new government coming up in October. So hopefully, I think next year we will be ready. But our role here is as an embassy as well. I've been working with the German government on getting assistance on how to establish Indonesian's ETS authority. We send people from Indonesia to come here. We want to do more, Excellency. If you can accept probably 50 more. Last time you took only 3. So maybe Germany can help us with bigger number, and as well as yourself. I'm interested in bringing people from Indonesia to come to EEX and establish ourselves the learning process and the learning curve. I think in ASEAN we are probably the only one that has all the carbon governance in place. We even have the IDX carbon market, but this all will wait for that all the technical regulations come in place. Now, so far, we have already definitively issued license for 6 companies with area of 215,000 hectares. The pipeline will be somewhere around 2 million hectares, around 80 companies in the future in relation to carbon market in terms of sequestrations of forest. So we have here the map here. This is RBP. This is run by the Ministry of Environment. So we have 4 projects so far. You have the Green Climate Fund, that's $55 per ton, more or less. You have in Sumatra, Jambi, ongoing until next year. Again, it's about $5 per ton. And in Kalimantan, FCPC Carbon Fund, again, more or less $5 per ton. And the below is with Norway, more or less around $5 per ton. So because we don't have the global price, $5 I think per ton is too low, in my opinion. But we at least we have something to start with at a particular time today. So I think all is in the pipeline, it's on the good directions. Private companies are also already applying for license to be able to have this kind of services in the future. So if only now we have 250,000 hectares, so I'm looking at probably even further in the future. Yeah. Total forest in Indonesia is somewhere around 126 million hectares. There's a changing business model. People who have the forest concession area, now they are looking at the calculation whether it is more profitable to get it with carbon sequestrations, selling for that, or cutting it to make a paper or furniture. Some said that it's a hassle to cut the tree, make a furniture. So just sell as it is, and the carbon sequestration, reforest even further, make more money with that. So this is a new approach. That is why the number is quite staggering. We are looking at 2 million hectares probably in the early next year already.
Yeah, no, and indeed, I mean, for us at the bank, Indonesia, the Congo Basin, and the Amazonas, if we can find a way to really get it right from emission reduction credit monetization, I think there could be a lot of lessons learned for other countries as well. as well as energy transition and coal decommissioning, which the ETM is also trying to work on. My next question is to you, Mr. Goke. Tell us about what Germany is doing to share lessons learned to other countries. The Ambassador Havas mentioned that you're working with Indonesia as well, but tell us about other efforts that Germany's doing.
Well, yes, definitely. I think we have been convinced for a long time that the strengthening and expansion of carbon pricing systems, both to other countries and to other sectors, is key to reaching our climate targets. Greenhouse gas pricing is seen in many countries as an important instrument to fulfill their NDCs within the obligations of the Paris Agreement. However, and that is an important point I would like to make at this stage of my statement, whether emission trading or a carbon tax is a more suitable solution for a country, and the exact way in which this is realized is highly dependent on local policy environment, and we have always that in mind. And for more than 15 years, Germany has been supporting countries with the development and implementation of carbon pricing instruments that fit their needs and circumstances. I think that is very important to be stressed. And initiatives that we support, for example, in this context include the World Bank-led Partnership for Market Implementation, the PMI, and the International Carbon Action Partnership, which have helped to organize this conference here. And in addition to multilateral initiatives, we also support countries bilaterally, as Indonesia has pointed out, also China and Mexico, with the preparation and introduction of emission trading systems on a bilateral level via the International Climate Initiative. So this is a very important aspect. Another point which I would like to mention here as well is that we will bring forward an instrument that can supplement the national pricing instruments. That means the international carbon market, trade and cross-border of emission reduction credits as per Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. And Germany itself is not a compliance buyer of Article 6 credits, as the EU has decided to use not to use international emission credits, but German companies are voluntarily committed to more climate action and want to procure high-grade reduction credits. And this gives us the opportunity that they work together with other countries in order to support the corporate commitment and to steer in the right direction to ensure that international carbon markets serve also as a voluntary carbon market. And yesterday I also already talked about the integrity of these markets. That is important for us, that will work, and we are looking upon this. But I think that is also an important aspect. So to sum it up, multilateral activities, as I pointed out, bilateral, working together for establishing emission trading systems, but also working on voluntary carbon markets, so that these different approaches can help us to establish carbon pricing globally.
Yeah, and that's certainly the approach that we're taking in the PMI program, where we're supporting countries across the board, domestic carbon pricing instruments, international carbon markets, and voluntary carbon markets. And I think the point you raise on different countries having different needs and the context-specific aspect is very important. I mean, we did a look back on our client country partners this year, and we saw the demand for capacity building on carbon markets is very high from sub-Saharan African countries, from middle-income countries, especially countries where the energy sector is the highest emitting sector, are very interested in ETS systems. Countries where land use is the highest emitting sector, ETS systems, maybe not as effective.
Yes.
So that's very much what we're learning, and what our client countries also engage with one another through the PMI Global Knowledge Forum. I think we have time for perhaps one or two questions before we wrap. Please. I think that's Anna. Yeah, nice to see you, Anna. Is there a mic floating around? Otherwise, Anna, you can walk to the mic.
Hi, Anna Audier from Respira. This is a question for Mr. Goka. Why has the EU decided not to allow for the use of international carbon credits?
Well, the question is that, or the point is that we have decided within the EU that we fulfill our obligations at home. I think that is, we want to show that we are ready and capable to, fulfill domestically the reduction targets that we have, that we have established in our NDC, and we want to show the whole world that this highly industrialized area of the globe is ready to find solutions for their own, in order to show that we take up this special responsibility that comes from the fact that we had the opportunity to develop industrial and to having been industrialized in the last 200 years, and want to show that we can do it, solve this as the countries are concerned from reducing the emissions in our own area of the European Union.
Any final question from the audience? Yeah, please.
Hello, Jesper Koik, project developer, Germany. Yeah, you're the man of the day, Mr. Goka, because actually it's another question for you. We talked a lot about compliance markets. As we have already a VCM working in Germany that is lacking a lot of quality and integrity, we are really looking forward to see some regulation framework of the government. And this is, so far, there is nothing, and it's quite sad regarding, that's especially sad regarding that Umweltbundesamt last year announced to be in a process of increasing quality integrity of VCM in Germany, but so far it's still quiet in this area.
Sometimes people in the government are quiet until they have found the concrete solution that we can are ready to present. So I have observed when these problems have come out in June, I think it was, when it had been discussed. The president of the German Environmental Agency, he took all his staffs together and they investigated the situation, they investigated the problems, and a lot of things had to be judged and seen what has gone wrong. And I think that has been done so far in the recent 2.5 months. And the next step will be that we will that we will make proposals how we can solve this problem and how we can contribute that the integrity of these carbon market approaches can be restored. So there is a clear perception of this problem. There's a very convincing way of analyzing the situation, find the different faults that have been made, and then draw conclusions in which way we can ensure a higher grade of integrity. I can tell you that the whole government in Germany, and when we are advocating carbon pricing and also these possibilities of upstream ways of fulfilling reduction targets, and it is clear, especially for the Minister of the Environment and also for the Minister of Economics, that we have to solve this, and the Environmental Agency is very intensively working on this, and I'm expecting that we will have that further proposals how we can solve these problems and how we can avoid that things can be repeated, that these proposals will come soon, and that is what I can predict here at this moment.
Thank you. And of course, the lack of rules of the game for VCM is an issue, globally, and many of the panels at I4C are focused on this. So thank you so much to our panelists, and thanks to the audience as well for the good questions. And we can now wrap.
Thank you.